Thank you for joining us here for this video. We've noticed that there are a certain percentage or a high percentage of our audience haven't subscribed to our channel. If you can please click on the button to subscribe to the channel, it will help us create more content. Which will help us reach more amazing people like you to support them, to serve them. So please click on the subscribe button, and I'll see you on the next video. Thank you. Bye. So our topic today is the power of influence, and I'll have some key cards. I'm gonna keep sharing here. And this week is all going to be about influence, and I'll go into what I mean by that, because influence can be positive, it can be negative as well. And of course, what we want to amplify is the positive influence. And if somebody wants to amplify negative influence, that's a whole other thing. That's not what this training is about. But we will talk about the negative influence and the effect of it. There is a framework that I will share that I'll go deeper into. And we can work through that together just to get you to think about what comes under influence. And it's a very big topic, and I've talked about it before. But for the sake of the group coaching session that we're going to go through this Thursday, I want you to start thinking through this whole week. And this is fairly fresh for me in my mind. So I'll share a couple of stories around influence and especially the positive influence and the impact of that in my personal life. And I want you to start thinking about some of those narratives and stories in your mind. Because one of the most powerful things I've understood that every human being, pretty much without exception, the past 10 years that I've gone deeper with, I've worked with them for years, their family, their team, every one of them has, without realizing it, they have a narrative, within that story and about their life. There have been some key figures, whether those were the people closest to them, whether that was an influential person of some kind in their life, or sometimes that could be an author, a coach, a mentor, or somebody they've never met, somebody who lived thousands of years ago, whose thoughts and ideas and ways of being really affected their way of thinking, their way of feeling, their way of approaching life, and how they showed up and connected with others, how they supported others or not supported others. And most of the time, this is a very subconscious process. One of the things that I try to do, get my clients to understand that influence so they can actually consciously pick what they want to carry over as a leader and what they don't. And one of those influences in my life, and I've shared this with everybody, is my grandfather-in-law, who was my mentor, my coach in a lot of ways. And the journey with him got started about close to 14, 15 years ago when I met him first. And I had shared this before, when I got engaged with my wife. I used to spend more time with him than, to be honest, with my wife at the time. Why? Because, and I didn't realize it at the time, whenever I would sit with him, he would ask questions. He would get me to think about things in ways that most other people didn't. He would get me to go deeper in areas that I didn't. Some of those questions were, at the time I had studied engineering. I was going into this field to get started as a young professional in my field. And he would ask questions like, why are you doing this? What is the thing that you're hoping to get out of it, other than money? And my first answer was, well, it's a high-paying job. Great. What else? What's your interest in it? What are you hoping to gain? What's your purpose in the process? What got you into it? And how does this connect with your identity? Like things, like questions like that he asked. He never told me what to do. He never pushed me one way or another. But it got me to rethink the path that I was going towards. And I realized I was very unconscious in the process. I wasn't being intentional. I didn't know why I was going. And to be honest, most of the reason why I was going towards that field was because I just copied a bunch of other people, and I saw that there were some other people who were successful. I had somewhat of an interest in it. So I was like, okay, let me go towards here. And that was just one piece. And I can tell you, as I look back over the past decade of being an entrepreneur, if it wasn't for those questions, I wouldn't be the kind of person that I am. I wouldn't be the coach that I am. I wouldn't be the kind of leader that I am. I wouldn't have gone on this path. I wouldn't be the kind of father that I am. It kind of changed the whole initial lens with which I see the world and how I move towards it. And that to me is incredibly powerful. And I want to share another quick story around this. So one of the younger adults in our family, a couple of years ago, I had a conversation with her, and I kind of paid that forward in a sense. And I've done this with many of the young adults in our family. So she was going into university, and she got into a very famous university here in Canada, and the program was around sciences and medicine. And I've known her since she was 4 or 5 years old. Now she's 20 something, and she used to write these amazing stories. She used to read a lot of stories about mythology and all sorts of other stories, and then she would start writing her own stories. And I used to read her stories even when she was like 7, 8 years old, and then she would write it in these, and I actually took the time to read a few of them. I'm like, oh my god, she's so talented. And throughout the past 20 something years, I've watched her, like the way she talks, the way what the things that she's interested. She's so deeply interested in that world of storytelling, literature, authorship, so many things like that. And then even when she has shared, it's like, I want to be an author. But one of the things in her mind was, well, authors don't get paid that much unless you're like somebody who's really famous, and that's very rare. And so when she was going towards it, she went towards the sciences. And one of her biggest reasons was that she wanted to, she's going towards there, very similar to how I thought about it, because it paid well and she was smart enough to go through it. And I basically told him, like, yeah, of course you are smart enough to go. And she had some influences in that area that got pushed her towards there. I'm like, you'll be just fine. You're smart enough to go through it. But I told her this one thing. I said that you would be a great dentist, and she wanted to go towards that. She wanted to become a dentist. You'd be a no. I didn't say it would be. I said you'd be an average dentist, and there will be somebody else in your class who will be a great dentist. But let me ask you this: if you were to go towards literature and you did become an author, my feeling is that you would be a great author. What do you think? Something along those lines. Now, this conversation happened a couple of years ago. And then we talked to her. She's like, yeah, I understand that, but I don't think that's practical. I'm like, okay, that's fine. I kind of, and we have a good relationship. So I joked around with her that I'll give you about 3 years. I think you will naturally change direction. I don't need to tell you anything. I don't need to say anything. So fast forward 2 years later, she just recently switched her major, and she went towards literature. And she came to me hesitant and was like, guess what? I'm like, what is it? It's like, I just applied for this program here. She's hesitantly telling me, it's like, I know what you're gonna say, told you so. First I was like, congratulations, that's awesome, you got into that program, and I told you so. And she kind of laughed too. I'm like, why do you think you went towards there? It's like that thing that statement that you said, that I would be a great author but not a great scientist, or not a great dentist, but an average dentist, and be just successful, I'd be fine. That stuck with me throughout. And as I was going through the process, I realized I had very little interest in this process. And of course, naturally, she was a lot more interested in literature, a lot more so than the sciences, even though she was fine. I knew that she was intelligent enough to go through it. And the reason why and that stuck with her for 2 years. I didn't tell her what to do. I didn't tell her what not to do. And she thought about it for 2 years moving forward. And I would say that's the power of influence. Now, in that case, you might think, well, I don't know if that's positive or negative. Maybe she could have been a great dentist. Well, I didn't tell her to go towards it or not. It was her choice. But I did tell her, this is what I have observed based on working with hundreds of people, that when they have an interest in something, they tend to be really good at it. They tend to not be average when it comes to that specific area. And the reason why I share this story is that, and it's on both sides, the influence on me and my influence on others. And that's one of the first things I want you to check in. What is the influence? The first piece of it is, what is the influence that's on you? And for me, that's not age related. A lot of people think that if you're younger and somebody's older, they will have influence on you. I think influence goes away. By the way, she has influence on me the way that she has been, and she's much younger than me. And her desire to do things that are interesting for her, and the way that she is. And there are lots of people, and my children have great influence on me. Why? Because of the natural way that they are. Now, the nature of that influence might change. There are some people who have negative influence on me. So I want you to think about what is the influence. The first piece of it is the people that you think about in your life, your friends, your family, your coworkers, teammates. What kind of influence do they have on you? And the key here is this: is the outcome net positive or net negative? I'm sure the thing that I shared with this person, or the questions that my mentor and coaches asked me, there are things that probably had negative effects short term, but then long term, it took me in a positive direction. And there are things that I struggled with. There are things that I experimented with. But what we're looking for is not perfection. What we're looking for is, what is the net effect of the community or the people that you're around on you? Is the net effect positive movement? Is the net effect growth? Is the net effect awareness? Is the net effect joy? Is the net effect all kinds of stuff like that? We're not talking about perfection. But what you find on average with most people is that the net effect, there's always positive and negative in every community, culture, every set of group, every set of individuals you're going to be part of, positive and negative, no matter how great they are. But for most people, what I find when I've worked with people is that the net effect of the closest people to them is usually negative, which means that it's not serving them. This is why I get people to think about, I ask them, who are your growth friends? Who are the people that push you to grow as a human being? Because likely they're the most positive influence you have in your life. And then the same goes the other way around. Your influence on others. Think about it, because we don't pay attention to it. There are times we might think that we're a positive influence. I guarantee you that you're positive and negative to the people around you. Now, we're looking for, again, the net positive outcome, that the overall effect that you have on people around you is net positive. Now, I mean, just last night, I ended up yelling at my kids and I lost my cool. That was in the moment a negative effect. But then I thought about it. I sat down and afterwards I went back and connected with them and I told them I shouldn't have yelled at them. And this is what happened. I'm sorry. And let's find a way to do this better. And they felt better. But what I'm looking for is not perfection. I'm not going to be perfect. I'm not going to have a positive effect. I'm not looking for perfection in people around me. Everybody has their flaws, but what is the net effect? And if you notice that the net effect that people have on you and then is negative, I would pay closer attention to that. If the net effect that you have on others, not based on what you think you have, based on what others tell you, that could be your clients, that could be your friends, that could be your family members. If they're constantly giving you the feedback that you're affecting them negatively, or you see that in their body language, you see that in all sorts of ways that they are around you, pay closer attention to that. And I run into that all the time. So I work with coaches as well. And I've had a couple of conversations with very advanced coaches who struggle in their relationship, for example. And in their mind, they think that they're being very positive, but every feedback that they get, for example, from their friends and family or some of their close relatives is negative. And they can't figure out why their effect is negative on them. And either they have a blind spot or there's something they're missing. And usually it's because they're not actually directly asking for feedback and they're defensive to feedback from others. So I want, and the reason why I'm sharing this is those are the two areas you need to be assessing quite a bit with every person in your life, even if those people are once in a while running into. And one good exercise you can do is actually go directly to people, say, hey, why do you hang out with me? Why do you spend time with me? Is it because of some obligation? And what do you feel after we've interacted? What is the feeling that you usually get? Most people will resist. Oh, because you're a good person. Just dig in a little bit. Ask them. It's an uncomfortable conversation sometimes, and you will find that people will tell you what the effect of it is on you, or at least they will clue you in. And sometimes you can just tell this from observation. And same thing towards other people, because a lot of people who are in this personal growth and development, they're leaders, they're like, oh, I can manage other people's effects on me. I guarantee you that other people have an effect on you and there are things you probably cannot manage. So what does that mean? That doesn't mean that, oh, I'm breaking contact with everybody, as much as the normal advice nowadays is that. No, go assess it. You will know what decisions to make once you pay closer attention to it. And most people don't pay closer attention to it because it's uncomfortable to ask yourself those questions and others those kind of questions. And so what, and the reason why I'm sharing these stories and getting you to think about those two questions, one, we're going to explore this much deeper in our group coaching session this Thursday, but I want you to start assessing both sides in your life. And I want you to think of influence as an umbrella. And I'll talk about the framework in a little bit, but there are two things that come into it. Influence has many different categories of knowledge that you need to be aware of. Information that is, I look at information that is, and when information is useful, that becomes knowledge. If information is just information, it's just a bunch of data. So it's knowledge plus skill set. And usually what people have when it comes to influence is information, but they cannot, they can't use that information. It's not usable. So that's why I'm getting you to ask that question from yourself. What is the effect that others have on you? What is the effect that you have on them? That will give you some information that you can start to put it to use, which becomes knowledge. And then it turns into a skill set, and that's experimenting with that skill set and seeing the effects of it turns into wisdom. And that wisdom piece is what most people are missing, because they haven't experimented with it, they haven't analyzed what's happening, they haven't gotten feedback, and so they're struggling with understanding what's happening with others' influence on them and their influence on others. So I want to share a model around this. And I'll go through this. The model for influence is, and I've kind of thrown in a bunch of stuff in there, and I'll share one by one. So the first piece is, so if you look at this influence model as an umbrella, and it equals, at the bottom, you will see leadership. So to me, influence equals leadership. Positive influence or net positive outcome of that influence is that you will lead people better, whether that's your family, your team, those you interact with, collaborate with. You will be in a better position to lead towards a positive outcome. And that leadership could be assertive, it could be collaborative, it could be all sorts of things. Those are modalities. We can talk about that. But influence to me equals leadership. And within the umbrella of influence, you will see multiple different knowledge categories. Let me see. Multiple different knowledge categories and skill sets. And I'll share a few of them. For example, the first one I've put in here is, I've termed it calm, but what I mean by that is communication. Communication is a knowledge compartment or department, and there are skill sets that you need to develop to communicate. That falls under the umbrella of influence. And most people struggle with communication because they think communication is just about words. It's about emotions. It's about body language. It's about tonality. It's about listening. It's about understanding. It's about empathy. So lots of things come into it. Another knowledge category is sales. By the way, everybody is a salesperson, even if you don't officially sell a product, because you're selling ideas, you're selling your own brand, you're selling perspective a lot of times. Even if you're talking to your child, you have to be able to sell an idea for them to be able to be open to it. That is it requires knowledge and skill set in that category. The next category might be negotiation. Negotiation is a category of knowledge and skill set. And they all fall under the umbrella of influence. The next one I've put in here, teaching and training, what I'm doing right now. It requires me to organize complex information into pieces that's absorbable for people. And to the degree I get better at it, I can better communicate and train and teach that. Marketing is an influence process. The difference between sales and marketing might be marketing is one-to-many versus sales might be one-to-one, or you might hear person-to-person or person-to-business or stuff like that. But marketing is one-to-many. But it's an influence process. And then I've put in, and these are very wide categories of EQ, SQ, IQ. Your ability to think will give you your ability to influence. Your IQ makes a difference. So we know that higher IQ is associated with better influence. We also know that actually emotional quotient, emotional intelligence is much more associated with influence than IQ. The SQ might be social quotient, like your ability to socially interact with others, understand social cues. So the reason why, so these are all knowledge categories in themselves, and there are skill sets that we need to develop within them. So influence is a very vast topic. And so I'm sharing this not to overwhelm you. I'm sharing this for you to understand the impact of this. So if you are a leader in your life, you are in business, you are running a family, a community, you need to delve into all of these areas. not for the sake of becoming an expert in each of them, but you need to have a general knowledge, usable knowledge base in each. But you need to start to develop skill sets in each of these areas around communication, around sales, negotiation, training, teaching, marketing, and develop your ability to your IQ. Yes, you're born with, but you can develop that as well. Your emotional quotient, yes, you're born with a certain amount, but you can develop that as well. Same thing with social intelligence, you can develop that. But the reason why I'm sharing this is so that and again, this is not just my opinion. When you look at some of the most high performing people around the world, you will see that if you ask them about each of these areas, they are knowledgeable and skilled in each of these areas to a degree. Now, again, we're not looking for mastery in each area. We're looking for a general foundational base in each of these areas. So what does that do? If you look at yourself as a leader, an influential person, or you want to be, then you naturally need to develop knowledge and skill set in each of these areas. And this is my invitation for you. And one of the fastest way to do that, one, we're doing this in our group coaching sessions, but if you're going to go towards if you're watching videos or reading books, find books around communication, find books around sales, find videos around negotiation or books around it, find ways to teach better, and for you to turn that knowledge into skill set, you need to experiment with it. Start teaching. Start being in sales conversations. That could look like in a personal life. That could be like, let me see if I can communicate this idea better. Let me see if I can ask better questions here. Let me see if I can train on this as an experiment. Let me see if I can market this idea to a few people. Again, it depends where you are, but these are important areas to think about. But influence covers all of those. So as a starting point, this is why I wanna simplify it. As a starting point, I want you to start thinking about what is the influence that's on you and what is the influence that others have on you. And are you developing knowledge and skill sets in different categories of influence? I'll leave it at that. And I'd love to hear, we have about 10 minutes or so in the training left, and I want to open it up to some discussion around this too. Scott, great to see you here. I'd love to hear, first of all, if you can put in the chat, what was the biggest insight here? Because I wanted this to be an introduction of things to think about this week, but also things to consider if you want to be an influential person or if you want to be an influential leader. Put that in the chat for me, and then we'll take it from there. We'll have a short discussion around it. What was your biggest insight based on what you heard today? And if you weren't here for the whole thing, I know, Scott, you came in later. I'm going to be posting the recording by tomorrow in our group. You guys a few more seconds. So, Davis is having to deal with his cat. Maybe Davis, you can share a little bit about, elaborate on what you said. What is it about the influence on you and others that stood out for you?
Could I pass just for a moment? There are other people in the room.
No worries. No worries. Yeah, we can go to Gezu. Impressed by influence covers all these topics. Interested to learn all. What is it that as a leader, what is it that stood out for you in that you need to? Are you saying that you need to expand your knowledge? Are you saying that you need to focus on a few of these areas? What are you saying, Gezu?
Faisal, just it's a very interesting topic. Yeah, just the word is familiar. Just we use it all the time, but I've never expect that there's a big scope and spectrum to cover that one influence word just with all these areas. And also, I'm surprised that and never think about like personal influence related with marketing. I've never think about it, just like because it comes from culture or other uh, childhood teaching or anything. Just like tell that, just like personal marketing or something is related with bragging or something like that, or just like but influence is just like some kosher form of using your knowledge and everything to put some footprints on people's, or at the same time be influenced by other people just to get a net positive gain. That is just really impressive. I've never think it that way with marketing, sales related with influence, but now I think I see something in the horizon. I can connect that influence or my personal influence with all these areas. Then that's why I want to dig in and excited just like to learn the Thursday topic, just to
Yeah.
dive in. That's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that, and what you and the one of the reasons why I break it down into that framework is so you understand how vast this field is, and it's equivalent to you. How are you showing up as a leader? And you don't just randomly become a leader. Some people experientially become leader because they actually start to develop skill sets within those areas. Some people, they do it based on theory and experimentation. Some people had a model. They had a great leader that they understood their model and they started experimenting with it. Again, there are different approaches to it, but once you understand that you can break it down, that it's a vast knowledge category that you can build skill sets around, it makes it simple. And we live in the world of information, which means that you can take, if you start reading up on it, you can take that information, turn it into useful knowledge, and start experimenting with it. Or start to pay attention to leaders around you. What can you learn from them? What are they modeling that you can learn from? And start to ask yourself the question of what kind of leader you want to show up. What is the influence that you want to have, which I talked about in the beginning? And what is the influence that you've liked on you? And what is the influence that you don't like on you, which will be clues for you to create the influence path that you want, the leadership path that you want. And those are powerful questions that most people do not ask themselves. For me, it's been a journey of close to now at this point 15 20 plus years of asking these kind of questions, which I didn't do it myself. Somebody got me to ask these questions. I was completely clueless in these areas, and I'm still asking these questions. How can I show up better? In fact, when you look at the data, when you look at the research by High Performance Institute, when they've asked leaders one powerful question, it was my coach who talked about it. And he developed this model, the certified high performance coaching process, Brendan Burchard. He's like, when we asked these top 15 leaders what about influence, the ones that were on those top 15 category, they all said something very interesting that I ask myself this question every day. And the question was, what is, let me see if I remember, I might have to paraphrase this. What is the impact I'm having on others around you? Or you can also say, what is the influence I'm having on others around you? I'm not around you, around me. So they were always asking a version of that question, that what is the impact I'm having on others and how can I get better in that process? And when Brendan Burchard heard this, and he said it in a conference, that to be honest, I don't ask myself that question every day, maybe once a week, maybe a couple of times a week, but not every day. But that's the power of a question like that. What is the impact that I'm having on those around me every day? And again, just asking that question can be a powerful growth process. I'd love to hear from Scott. I know you've been on a growth journey, but what stands out for you here?
Well, for influence, for me, it's always about understanding the perspective of the other person first. It's sort of like seek first to be understood, and then, seek first to understand and then be understood. So you have to understand the person first before you try to influence them.
Yeah, I love that, which goes into those categories that I mentioned around, especially around EQ and SQ, which means emotional quotient. You need to understand that person emotionally, where they're coming from, because for most people it'll be emotional first, and then the other one is their understanding and your ability to be empathetic and understanding of where they're coming from in their experience. And second is the social side, your social intelligence, which you're referring to, is to understand how can I understand this person before they understand me. And that falls into the category of the social side. And a lot of us, we struggle with that, especially nowadays, because our mind is distracted. We're not fully there with that person. Even if somebody's pouring their heart out, we might not fully understand based on their words, because we're not paying attention to their body language, their tonality. And again, one powerful negotiator said this. What's his name? He wrote, the FBI negotiator, never split the difference. I forget his name right now, but he would put it as that if you're, and he's talking about negotiating with terrorists, and his first piece of that is, how can I understand this person from a human point of view without labeling this person as a terrorist? And none of us will